At the threshold of the world's highest peaks, ambition comes at an unforgiving price. Last year, 650 climbers reached Everest's summit, but 11 never returned. These mountains are more than legendary tests of strength. They're billion-dollar industries and graveyards of vanished pioneers. If the allure is eternal, why is the cost steeper than ever? The answer starts much further back than you might think. In the summer of 1854, a small group of climbers stood at the base of the Wetterhorn in Switzerland, staring up at a jagged summit that had never been reached. Their equipment was little more than hemp ropes, wooden-handled ice axes, and layers of wool to keep out the chill. There were no oxygen tanks and no detailed weather forecasts, only determination and a belief that the mountain could be climbed. That year, Alfred Wills and his companions reached the top, igniting what became known as the Golden Age of mountaineering. As word of these first alpine conquests spread, the pursuit quickly grew beyond Switzerland's borders. The mountains became arenas for a new kind of adventure, where endurance mattered more than technology, and every ascent was a lesson in improvisation. Climbers faced dangers they barely understood: avalanches, sudden storms, and the invisible threat of altitude sickness. There was no scientific explanation for the pounding headaches or the confusion that set in above 4,000 meters, only the hard-earned wisdom that the mountains demanded respect. By the 1920s, ambition had turned toward the Himalayas. Expeditions set their sights on the world's highest peaks, with Everest as the ultimate prize. In 1924, George Mallory and Andrew Irvine joined a British team for what would become one of mountaineering's greatest mysteries. On June 8th, the pair were last seen climbing high on Everest's northeast ridge, moving steadily toward the summit. They never returned. Decades later, Mallory's body was discovered at 8,155 meters, but the camera that might have proved a successful summit was missing. To this day, whether they stood atop Everest remains unknown. Mallory's story and the risks faced by those early climbers shaped the spirit of mountaineering for generations. Their legacy is one of raw courage and a willingness to face the unknown, using little more than instinct and resolve. The mountains, in turn, offered no guarantees, only the promise of challenge and the possibility of vanishing into legend. By the 21st century, the world's tallest peaks had become the backdrop for a booming commercial industry. Everest, once the realm of a handful of elite climbers, now draws hundreds of paying clients each spring season. In 2023, the Nepal government issued more than 450 permits for Everest alone, each costing around $11,000. Add in guide fees, equipment, and logistics, and a single summit attempt can reach $50,000 or more. The industry generates billions of dollars worldwide, fueling an influx of climbers from every continent and filling base camps with tents, satellite phones, and the hum of generators. Behind every summit photo stands a workforce that makes these ascents possible. Sherpas and high-altitude porters handle the most dangerous jobs, carrying loads, fixing ropes, and shuttling oxygen bottles up the mountain's deadliest passages. On Everest's south side, the ratio has shifted dramatically. In 2024, there were about 1.5 Sherpas for every client, a reversal from earlier decades. Sherpas now outnumber foreign climbers on summit days, with over 6,000 Sherpa summits recorded since 1953, compared to just under 6,000 by clients. For many Sherpas, the seasonal wages, typically $2,000 to $3,000 per expedition, are substantial compared to other local work. Yet the risks remain stark. In 2014, an avalanche in the Khumbu icefall killed 16 Sherpas in a single morning, exposing the precarious balance between economic opportunity and personal danger. Demands for better pay and insurance followed, but many still face hazardous conditions with limited protection. The reality is that every successful commercial expedition depends on this essential labor force, whose expertise and sacrifice often go unrecognized outside the climbing world. In 2023, 650 climbers reached Everest's summit. 11 died. As the scale of guided expeditions grows, so does the exposure to danger, not just for clients, but for the Sherpas who lead the way again and again, situated into the heart of the mountain's risks. Annapurna rises from the Himalayas with a reputation that chills even the most seasoned climbers. Out of every 100 who attempt its summit, nearly a third never return. Annapurna's 32% fatality rate is the highest among all 8,000-meter peaks. The dangers are relentless: avalanches, sudden storms, and treacherous descents where exhaustion and thin air cloud judgment. For many, the summit is only half the battle. More than half of all deaths on Everest occur during the descent, when fatigue and depleted oxygen turn every step into a gamble. The world watched these risks play out in real time during the 1996 Everest disaster. On May 10, 1996, climbers from multiple expeditions pressed for the summit despite warning signs. By late afternoon, a violent storm trapped dozens above 8,000 meters. 8 climbers died in less than 24 hours. Some were lost to exposure, others to falls as visibility vanished and strength faded. Survivor accounts describe confusion, frostbite, and desperate radio calls as the wind erased footprints and hope alike. Decisions made under pressure, with turnaround times ignored and ropes misplaced, turned a challenge into a catastrophe. The statistics tell a stark story. Free soloing, climbing without ropes or protection, accounts for about 20% of climbing deaths in places like Yosemite. On high peaks, the death zone spares no one, regardless of experience. Every ascent demands a reckoning with forces that can overwhelm even the best prepared climbers. Inside the mind of an extreme climber, the usual boundaries of risk and caution take on a different shape. Neuroscientists studying elite athletes like Alex Honnold, who famously free-soloed El Capitan without ropes, have uncovered a brain uniquely tuned for risk. MRI scans of Honnold's brain revealed a muted response in the amygdala, the region responsible for processing fear. When shown images that would trigger anxiety in most people, Honnold's amygdala stayed silent, allowing him to remain calm where others freeze. This is not recklessness, but a rare ability to control emotion paired with years of deliberate practice. Further brain imaging shows climbers like Honnold develop a larger cerebellum, the part of the brain that manages fine motor control and coordination. Years spent rehearsing tiny hand and foot movements on vertical stone translate into physical changes, giving elite climbers split-second precision. But the mountain environment takes its own toll. Prolonged exposure to thin air can cause subtle loss of brain tissue, especially in regions tied to movement and memory. MRI studies of high-altitude climbers reveal decreased white matter in motor pathways and minor atrophy in areas involved in planning and recall, even when climbers feel no immediate symptoms. For some, these adaptations open doors to feats that seem impossible. For others, the risks, both physical and neurological, are a price paid on every ascent. Glaciers that once locked the world's great peaks in place are melting at an unprecedented rate. On Mont Blanc, the Gutter Couloir, once a reliable route, now sees daily rockfall as permafrost thaws, sending boulders tumbling where climbers once moved safely. In the Karakoram, Serac collapses, and shifting ice have forced guides to abandon classic lines, while new crevasses open each season, turning familiar paths into unpredictable hazards. Himalayan expeditions now report entire sections of route missing by spring, reshaped by a single warm winter. Technology is racing to keep up. In Pakistan's 2022 Broad Peak Rescue, thermal drones pinpointed stranded climbers within hours, a task that once took days of searching by foot or helicopter. These unmanned aircraft can fly where rescuers cannot, delivering emergency supplies or mapping avalanche risks in real time. At the same time, wearable sensors and satellite beacons now track climbers' movements and vital signs, allowing teams to respond faster when trouble strikes. But innovation alone cannot solve every problem. Debate is growing over how many climbers the world's highest peaks can safely support. In Nepal, officials have proposed capping Everest permits to reduce crowding and environmental strain, while some operators call for stricter training requirements. The Sherpa community, at the center of these discussions, weighs the promise of safety against the economic lifeline that guiding provides. As the mountains change, so must the ways people climb them, balancing ambition, technology, and the hard lessons written in ice and stone. As climate change reshapes the world's highest peaks and crowds push limits on fragile slopes, each ascent now carries new risks. The mountains are changing, yet our drive to climb remains.